Hey Tim, how are you? Great to be with you today, and thanks to everyone for joining. I'd like to tell a story today about how Adalta is generating next generation protein therapeutics for multi-billion-dollar markets. This slide really highlights our purpose in life, which is to go where traditional antibody drugs cannot. As you'll see shortly, monoclonal antibodies can't do everything, and we're really playing in a space where the platform technology we have is significantly advantaged. The engine room for our company is our discovery business, where we're utilising what we call our iBody technology platform and our in-house discovery team to deliver lead drug candidates that bind to critical therapeutic targets. The value of those targets is realised through the ongoing development of products, moving those candidates through the process of product development until we either out-license them if we're developing them themselves, or till we earn milestones from future development with the co-development partners we're working with. So we have two focus areas therapeutically: our fibrosis and inflammation pipeline we wholly own ourselves today, and our immuno-oncology pipeline is a co-development collaboration. On the next slide, we talk about our value proposition. Our customers are larger biopharmaceutical and pharmaceutical companies who are looking to fill their pipeline with advanced stage drugs and drug candidates. And we create value by successfully generating products that are of interest to them. Ultimately, yes, we want to address customer, patient unmet needs and solve healthcare problems. But at the end of the day, who we're selling to is pharma. And we're selling essentially both our iBody platform. We provide access to pharma companies to the iBody platform so that they can run discovery against targets that they're interested in. That spins out co-development collaborations, where we continue to earn income over time as those products are developed, but where we are offsetting a large part of the initial discovery costs. And then the second model is, of course, we use the iBody platform to develop our own products, sort of at risk, higher return, but obviously higher expense. So really what we're playing at is that space where antibodies can't do everything, despite transforming the pharmaceutical industry 30 years ago. We can now take that to the next generation and help deal with those applications where traditional antibodies can't. The products themselves, there are three examples here. I'll talk about the fibrosis portfolio and the CAR-Ts later on today, but we have three products in development areas at the moment. Fibrosis is a degenerative and progressive disease that ultimately destroys organ function. Kidney, for example, is a $3 billion market. It's a $10 billion market. Lung is $3 billion. Eye is a $15 billion market. Fibrosis is ultimately the cause of failure of many of those organs. In the CAR-T cell therapy space, I'll talk more about what this is in a moment, but it's transformed outcomes for patients with hematological cancers. And we're collaborating with a local biotech company, Karina Biotech, to take that same hope into patients with solid tumours. And finally, we're working with multinational company GE Healthcare to revolutionise the way we assess and allocate patients receiving checkpoint inhibitor therapies or immunotherapies for their cancer, to ensure that we get patients onto the right treatment as early as possible. Today, it's not possible to identify responders to these therapies until about 6 months after treatment initiates. That's too late because the only indicator is the tumour has progressed. What we want to do with GE is solve the problem of getting their diagnosis and their likely response identified within weeks. So putting that another way, on the next slide, you can see what our pipeline looks today. We have 7 programs in development. Our most advanced, AD214, is being developed in 4 different indications and 2 different routes of administration. The remainder of our programs are in lead optimization or early preclinical. So let me turn now to each of our assets in turn. On the next slide, we'll talk about our iBody platform. This is summarised on the next page, where you can see the cartoon illustrates on the right-hand side the advantages of the iBody. It's a much smaller than a traditional monoclonal antibody, and its unique structure allows it to get into deep binding crevices that a traditional monoclonal antibody can't. On the other hand, it does confer the selectivity and specificity that you don't get with small molecules, and that reduces the number of off-target and toxicity effects. The other important feature of the iBodies is that they are, being small, can be used in a modular format, a sort of click and build or a plug and play type scenario, where you can assemble them with other different components to produce therapeutics, to deliver therapeutic payloads to specific targets and other particular applications. And this is where the CAR T therapy examples come in. I'll turn now on the next slide, in fact 2 slides on, to our 8214 program. This is our lead program. Antifibrosis is an antifibrotic. This is a particular example on this slide of idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis or lung fibrosis. So this is scarring of the lungs that irreversibly reduces lung function. Median survival is about 4 years from diagnosis. There are 2 current therapies on the market today that sell for $3 billion a year, but they don't work. They have very limited effectiveness and serious side effects. And on top of that lead application we've been looking at, there are other fibrosis market opportunities. As I mentioned, fibrosis affects almost every organ system. We've heard a lot about long COVID. A large part of the long COVID effects we're seeing is fibrotic damage to lungs, heart in particular. And the recent reemergence of silicosis, which is essentially a fibrotic disease of the lungs, is another example of why we need better and newer antifibrotic drugs. The next slide talks about where we are with 8214 today. The left-hand side slide shows that in an animal model of lung fibrosis, we are capable of reducing the scarring and the tissue destruction that you see with IPF. The bottom picture shows the collapse of the nice open architecture in the lung that allows gas exchange. The picture on the right shows that when treated with 8214, you get a much more normal lung architecture. And the right-hand side is a key piece of data from our phase 1 clinical trial, where we demonstrated that the drug was well tolerated, but importantly, we're able to demonstrate that we blocked its target receptor for up to 3 weeks, which is really important for a convenience perspective. You don't want a patient having to come in for an injection every day. We need to be able to push that dosing interval out to weeks, and this data gave us confidence that we could achieve that. So the next slide talks about the opportunities and next steps for 8214. As I mentioned, we're focused on 4 different indications: lung and kidney fibrosis with an intravenous route of administration, eye fibrosis, and a collaboration with a Korean company to explore cancer. We've also developed a inhaled formulation, and we have proof of principle that we can deliver 8214 via inhalation for life cycle management and extension in lung fibrosis. So we're currently working hard to plan and prepare for phase 2 intravenous clinical trials in lung or kidney fibrosis. The execution of the trials themselves is subject to future financing. I'll talk more about that in a moment. But we are working on the back of, we're working to develop some complementary preclinical data. We've booked the manufacturing and toxicology slots, and we're expecting to finalise the clinical strategy in the middle of this year. We've advanced partnering discussions with a wide range of pharmaceutical companies around the world. We believe we have a very strong value proposition for this asset. It is a first-in-class molecule, which is always important to be first to market with a particular mode of action. We have a very extensive preclinical package. It was well tolerated in initial clinical trials with up to 4 indications in multi-billion-dollar markets. We are pursuing non-dilutive financing for the phase 2 programs. Part of that is the partnering strategies I just mentioned, but it's also about looking at other non-dilutive routes, joint ventures, project financing, and so on. And the investments we're making in the meantime are really around preserving timelines and manufacturing slots to phase 2, addressing the questions that our partners are answering or asking of us in relation to the asset, and we continue to work with our vendors to ensure that we have speed and flexibility of pathway to phase 2 without incurring significant costs ahead of that non-dilutive financing. On the next slide, just shows the value of these assets. I highlight the 2 deals done that are got boxes around them. They were done in the last 6 months. A preclinical asset for idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis sold to AbbVie for $225 million total, and a deal between Conixa and Genentech for a phase 2 ready asset with an $80 million upfront payment and $620 million in potential milestones. So this continues to be an active partnering space with active interest from pharma companies at all stages of development. Let's move on to the CAR-T program at the moment. And on the next slide, just a very, very brief description of what CAR-T cells are. What we're doing here is engineering a patient's own immune system so it can go and find cancer and therefore kill it. Cancer is an expert at hiding from our immune system. The idea is that we can now genetically modify the cancers with a receptor that is able to then find the tumor and kill it. This is projected to be a $20 billion market, with a big opportunity being moving hematological or blood cancers into solid cancer treatments. We have an existing collaboration described on the next page with biotechnology, where we're using our iBodies as the targeting vehicle to direct their CAR cells to the tumours. We've progressed the first target we're working on with them through in vitro screens, and we're preparing to begin in vivo proof of concept studies in the middle of this year, which potentially gives us preclinical proof of concept by the end of the year. And we're about to start discovery on the next 2 targets. There is significant industry interest in this application of our iBodies. And you can see the value of the assets on the next slide, which shows that projects that have reached that preclinical proof of concept stage, where we may be with our first asset by the end of the year, are commanding transactions with up to $25 million up front and $730 million total deal value. So this is a really valuable asset at a very, very early stage. The next slide, or 2 slides on, in fact, talk about what we've got coming. As I mentioned, the big focus for 8214 is now about finalising the phase 2 strategy and the financing for that phase 2 program, all of which then enables us to kick off the final large expenses of manufacturing and toxicology. But the big theme here is around progressing and accelerating our existing partnering discussions. For the CAR-T program, I'm super excited about the preclinical proof of concept data that's coming, and again, progressing those partnering conversations that we're having with large pharma. So the big theme for us really is the potential transformational effect of transactions that we may be able to achieve within the next 6 to 9 month period. And finally, I think the next slide summarises why I think Adalta is a great opportunity. We have an iBody platform that can create value over and over. We have a wholly owned program in 8214 that's moving towards phase 2 and partnering windows. We have additional programs in co-development that offset the development costs, but are also addressing that our in-house team can develop drugs all the way to the clinic. And that makes us unique in the Australian biotech, or relatively unique in the Australian biotech space. And importantly, we have a steady news flow with the transformational upside of transactions. We're not forecasting them, but they could happen in the next 6 to 9 months, and that will really transform our company going forward. So with that, Tim, I'll stop and see if there are any questions.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. We're out of time, unfortunately, but a couple of quick questions. A technical one: how do the iBodies bind themselves to the actual target?
So the iBodies have a structure on them that's very similar to the binding region of a monoclonal antibody. Essentially, there is a loop of amino acids, and those amino acids engage with amino acids in the target receptor on a cell. And so it's a protein-protein interaction for those that understand the technology. Essentially, you match the amino acids on the iBody with the amino acids in the receptor, and that creates a tight linkage that's very, very specific.
And AD214, you touched on this, but what's the strategy for funding that phase 2 trials?
So we're pretty committed to finding non-dilutive ways of financing that asset. It needs to start earning a return for us. First and foremost is through our partnering conversations. This could be a range of out licensing arrangements with where a large pharma company takes over the asset. We have a number of pharma companies we're working with under CDA at the moment. We also have a number of co-development or joint venturing discussions going on with regional pharmaceutical companies where they would take on the marketing commercialization in a specific market, but also help us finance the asset globally for a share of the global returns on the asset.
And Tim, on that table, I mean, you've got a market cap of 11 million. Some of these drugs are getting upfront payments of 25 million, and then obviously the value of that drug moving forward. Is it that simple? Is that where you see the value is with Adalta?
Look, we think that's the opportunity. You know, we can't guarantee we'll pull off those transactions, and we can't guarantee the value of them, and we'll do the right transaction for our shareholders. But when you look at those numbers, you say, you know what, you know, we've got, because it's not just one, we've got the CAR T assets and the future potential of the iBody pipeline as well. It's quite clear that not all of those are included in our share price today.
Certainly looks that way. That's all we have time for, Tim. Thanks for your time, and we'll follow with interest.
Thank you.